Brothers learn to turn to each other in compassion over the whole of the course of the book of Genesis. And good luck if you happen to be a sister. What happened to Dinah, that sister amongst the sons of Jacob? Vatetse Dinah bat Leah asher yalda leYaakov lirot bivnot haaretz. She ventured out, Dinah, just as her father had once done, this daughter of Leah and Jacob. She ventured out to see the young women of the land. Now one can imagine her venturing out, sometimes over the years having been forgotten about, surrounded by all those boys, lonely, eager for some camaraderie. Yet whereas her father's venturing out is the beginning of his spiritual growth, Dinah is almost immediately abused by a man. And her brothers, rather than turning to Dinah, instead turn to revenge, inflicting violence on all the men of the city. What happens to Dinah? The text too, the Torah, no longer turns to her, letting her disappear. Turning or failing to turn to your sibling punctuates Genesis and the beginning of Exodus. Joseph's brothers turn to each other to plot against him. And it is years afterwards that they learn to turn to each other and to Joseph in remorse and in love. In Egypt too, the depth of oppression is articulated by one Israelite striking his fellow. The plague of darkness means a person cannot see another person. We sink most deeply when we fail to see our fellow or are not seen by them. And then, with the exodus from Egypt, the movement towards revelation at Sinai, and then in our Torah portion, building a home for the divine, a person might have dreamt about leaving the messy back and forth of human interaction behind them. Give me spiritual ascension. Let me dwell in the cloud, exalted and alone forever. Raise my eyes to the mountains, to the thunder and the lightning, and let me forget the smallness of people in the face of the eternal, the exalted, the ultimate. In the home of God, as we approach it in our Torah portion, let me venture in and look up at a raised vaulted ceiling, at images of divine grandeur, and let me be overcome by awe. But that person seeking to look up and blissfully away from the business of other people might find themselves very disappointed in our Torah portion as they approach the home of God. For what shall they encounter? Firstly, before the home is even built, everyone in the community whose heart moves them is told to contribute, to give of their own personal possessions and of themselves to help build this structure, such that whenever they see the home, they will be reminded of the tents of the people next to them and of the need and power of human participation. Then the tabernacle itself, as one approaches, is covered in images of faces turning to each other. The faces of the cherubs that turn to each other too in the inner sanctuary, just in front of the ark. This indicates that revelation will not necessarily burst forth from on high, but will only emerge when two fleshy faces turn to each other. The Hebrew of the Torah is ish el achiv, a man to his brother. Now the Torah knows how to say this turning to that, zeh al zeh, as we find with angels turning to each other in Isaiah. However, the importance of human relationship is verbally woven into multiple aspects of this divine structure. This and that cellar of the tabernacle is described, this and that side, but the word cellar recalls the first human being split, with one cellar, one side, becoming another human, a constructive companion in a constant play between harmony and challenge. In the verses that we heard, the curtains are described as interlocking, chavrot, isha el achota. Don't be fooled by a translation that opts again for those curtains being connected one to another. The very curtains, according to the Hebrew, are bound like a woman to her sister. So perhaps that person hoping to look up and away from human relationships is instead taught by the tabernacle that each spiritual step must also be a turning towards one's fellow human being. Rather than escaping, we instead see the power of human relationship and our necessary and inevitable return to it. We learn in our Judaism and community to never again let a dina disappear. We learn how good it is, how vital to all we do to dwell together, to turn to the other. So make each step into your Judaism and into this community one of turning to the other. To pinpoint the moments when this community first became important to me, I look back to more than 12 years ago, when I was the very part-time B'nai Mitzvah class teacher. But Renee and Rabbi Thomas and Rabbi Rebecca kept on asking me to do things that weren't really in my job description. Could I speak to a few parents before Or Shabbat about the importance of making an impact beyond the community? Renee asked. Rabbis Thomas and Rebecca asked me to read some Torah very badly in the end and to give a sermon. I didn't complain that they were asking too much. I was flattered and hugely enjoyed doing these things. More than this, the community began to really mean something to me, because I was asked and moved to bring something of myself. The lesson here is not to give rabbis and those who might become rabbis more to do. The lesson is to turn to another, see something in them, and allow them to contribute to the community, making it their own. In the team that you may be in, we're seeing more and more of you turning to one another, asking for a one-on-one meeting within that team to build relationship, or looking outside of the team to bring another person closer to the community. In our adult education team or our justice team, each leader increasingly knows that to build more meaning, the next step is to turn to another person and build relationship. You might each ensure that at every juncture of your time in this community, you are connecting to others, you're participating yourself, and you're building the participation of others. Join a team or help us weave conversations into everything we do. Our building review committee, and I think at least one member might be here right now, might continue to bear in mind what conversations and interactions will happen in each room of our beautiful building. For we know that a spiritual building is one in which relationship is built. In our Judaism, many of our inspirational responsibilities, our mitzvot, are ben adam lachavaro. They're between a person and their fellow. Ask yourself, can you take on one or two more of these? Welcoming the stranger, calling the lonely, sitting with the vulnerable. You may want to join our chesed team, volunteering to do caring, loving kindness within the community. I'm proud that over the last year, when we've been most separate, when we might have hoped to escape into spiritual solitude, we've rather turned to each other most, developing leaders and teams, relational learning, and multiple calls between each other. We do look forward to when we can really turn to each other in person, a human to their fellow, a sister to their sister, in this extended family of ours. In the passage that you chanted, Felix, so beautifully, Benot Tzlofchad, these daughters of Tzlofchad, these sisters, they step forward courageously and securely, and they add to the Torah. Perhaps all that time looking at the tabernacle taught them that in community, each and every person can turn to another and step forward with lessons learned from that past loneliness of Dina. So let us each contribute to such a community. Shabbat Shalom.